Bruins Beat is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. I am recording inside a hotel room. Hopefully this Wi-Fi holds up. I'm on the free Wi-Fi at the Hilton in Buffalo. I'm up here for Select 17, USA Hockey Select 17. So good talent and interesting. It's all hockey all day, which is great. Last time, Conor, I recorded in a hotel room, I was in quarantine at UMass. Oh,
yes.
I don't know if you remember that. That's the last time I was in a hotel room.
How could I?
Yeah.
That's when you were a budding TikTok star. That's when you were trying to find all the different food meals. I know you UMass people like to rep your dining hall and what have you. I don't know if like the COVID quarantine one was still up to par of the lofty standards you guys have, but that was your chance to break through on TikTok.
It was my chance, and I didn't quite do it like I would hope to have. But the food was pretty good then. Food was pretty good.
Also, Evan, you've long awaited for a breaking news thing. Per Elliot Friedman, Taylor Hall is going to be traded to the Chicago Blackhawks. So
you're getting a live reaction here, folks. We're not editing this out.
Yes.
And then, of course, the first reply is Petrov McGuire saying, "For vacation?"
Yes.
Of course it is. All right, that's legitimate. So I'm glad this happened now as we're recording this and not after.
Yes.
So, we're doing this again at 2:45 on Monday. I'll let you send out your tweet as I kind of talk through this. This isn't really a surprise. The minute Elliot Friedman tweeted out that the Bruins and Chicago were linked, you knew that something was about to happen. You knew maybe left defense with Matt Grzelcyk, Taylor Hall up front, potentially getting more speedy in Chicago. I'm very curious to see the return on this. And again, that has not come out yet. And it's unfortunate because, again, we've talked about this all so far in the offseason. Hall is a great player. He's good, he's solid, but it's a luxury if you're going to keep Bertuzzi, which they want to do. The Bruins want to keep Tyler Bertuzzi. Fits a little bit more, a little younger. This is kind of a casualty of it. So, I mean, what's your sort of first reaction to this?
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where Hall has been tabbed as a potential trade chip for months now, right? You're looking at a guy that his value of what he is, and he's a guy that I think was a very good Bruin during his time here, but he's someone that when you look at that $6 million cap hit, where the Bruins are, what limited space they have, would they like to keep Taylor Hall? Of course. Yes, no, of course they would. But I think you look at just what needs to happen for them to especially retain a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi. I think that's the biggest key, right? And if you're looking at Taylor Hall, who's 31, or Tyler Bertuzzi, who's 28, who played in the top six during his limited time here, gave you a different dynamic in that top six, had a lot of chemistry with David Pastrnak. That's a situation where I think you look at just where this team is going forward and who you want to build around more for the future. It makes more sense for Bruins to target a guy like Bertuzzi, who's 28, than a guy like Hall. Now, let's see what happens, right? If Bertuzzi still signs somewhere else, then, I mean, the Bruins still are probably creating more cap space. But still, I think when you look at just, the domino effect of moving Hall and what the most likely option is going to be for this team moving forward, you kind of see why exactly the Bruins had this line of thinking.
Yeah, and I think if this deal, and now again, we'll see what the return is. The return has not come out yet. I guess if Ullmark was involved, then maybe the Bruins get that 19th pick that Chicago has in the first round this year. I doubt Hall is getting you that right now. So I'm kind of curious to see what the return on this is, because, teams know the Bruins are cap constrained. The Athletic did a story on the worst cap situations. I think the Bruins were number 31 in terms of just how bad their cap situation is. So teams know that, and they're not, they know the Bruins are kind of constrained by it. So I'm curious. I keep refreshing Twitter to see what the return is. Do you think anything else gets included in this deal, or there's separate? Because I don't know. The Ullmark and the Grzelcyk thing kind of makes sense. from that.
Yeah, that's the thing. When of course I just had a nice little story on the Bruins and the Blackhawks and them, having these discussions. And again, the Blackhawks made a lot of sense, right? In terms of, I think they were going into this offseason with $37.5 million in cap room. Not a lot of teams have that luxury. And also they have multiple draft picks. And again, we'll see kind of what the return is. We'll see what kind of draft pick. If it's just Hall for essentially a cap dump, I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to give you a good return. The real asset there, of course, is freeing up the cap space to then hopefully retaining a guy like Bertuzzi. So that's something you have to be very cognizant about. But you look at just where else Chicago is, like, of course they're rebuilding, but they have a lot of holes on the left side of their defense. So a guy like Grizzly could make sense there. Forward, even Riley, I know we've talked a lot about how the Bruins had trouble moving him, but as a guy that, as someone like Riley who is from Illinois, is a puck-moving guy, a guy who should be in the NHL, on a full-time basis. Team of Chicago makes a lot of sense in terms of low cost, not giving up a whole bunch, and he could be a guy that plays next year on a still pretty bad Chicago team and has, 20, 30 points, what have you, and that, they can flip him for another asset. So I'd be very curious to see if they do find more ways to move a player, or if more guys are included in this package, because again, Chicago has plenty of cap space to take on whatever the Bruins want to dump in terms of a contract.
Yeah, to me, this seems, they're dumping money to retain Bertuzzi. That seems like this is the move for that. I think even if I'm prepared to be underwhelmed on this return in the trade, just because, if this clears room for, my guess is Bertuzzi's coming at around 5.5, 6 potentially, for, somewhere in the 8-year range, maybe. So if that's the case, then you upgraded there. Again, it's tough because in a perfect world, you would have both Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi. You had that this year. Unfortunately, things didn't really work out. And it's sort of a luxury. You can't have both Hall and Bertuzzi. It's clear that they were going to choose, Bertuzzi, and now it's kind of obvious with him going to Chicago. It's unfortunate because I think the Taylor Hall era in Boston, I think we expected more. He was fine here. He made sense. He was solid at times. But even this past year, he took his assignment well, being on the third line with Coyle and Frederick. But why is he on the third line? We get it because the team was so good ahead of him, and Zacha fit well with Krejci and Pasternak. But I still, Chris Johnson just tweeted the Blackhawks were not among the 16 teams listed on Hall's no trade list, so Boston was able to complete this deal without him, without his consent. So no Torrey Krug situation, which we'll get to in a bit if nothing more comes up on this. But yeah, I don't know. Taylor Hall in Boston, the Taylor Hall is a Boston Bruin thing. It was great, but I don't know. It felt like they just didn't really hit it with him.
Yeah. I still think he was good for what his role. And when you look back at 2021, when you acquire him as that long lost top 6 wing to pair with David Krejci, and it worked out great. It's just, unfortunately, they just came up short in that series against the Islanders. It's one of those things, though, where you look at the last, couple of runs that they've had with Hall in place. I wouldn't really put most of it on Hall himself. I think it's just more the team as a whole underperforming, because I think he fit in well. Like, you look at just what, especially this year, he sacrificed for the greater good of the team. And this is the guy that was coming off of last year, had 60 points, was looking to win, was a guy that, changed his role into more of a defensive forward on the third line. And, I'm sure he wasn't thrilled about it, but accepted his role for the greater good of trying to win that elusive Stanley Cup. Didn't get it, but he's one of the few guys you got to give credit to that elevated his game once he got to the playoffs. So, again, I don't think it was definitely wasn't a bad trade at the time, right, in terms of how much you kind of fleeced Buffalo for it. And I don't think the Bruins were really off course in terms of signing into that contract. We were looking at, I think at the time, $6 million seemed pretty fair for a guy like him who's, part of that, next group of guys you want to build around. Is he a guy long-term that was part of the foundation? Probably not. And again, that's why they're moving on from him now. But again, I think for what his role was and what he provided in various spots, kind of whatever the team needed of him, and he delivered. Good pro. And, it's a tough situation now going to a team like Chicago, who is not going to be contending most likely. I'm sure he probably will get a lot of reps with Connor Bedard this year. So ideally he kind of boosts his numbers up after being a third liner here, but still unfortunate to see that case. It's still the nature of the business, what have you. But so I thought it was a good Bruin who did a good job here in the various roles kind of handed to him.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of mean more in the sense of, as you said, like, he did his job. You saw, he was, I think, second on the Bruins in points. This playoff run, like, fit really well with Krejci back when they acquired him in 2021. But like, even this past year, like, just kind of getting bumped by a guy like Zacha, just with the fit and stuff. Like, just, I don't know. I expected him to be here a little bit longer. And again, maybe things are different if they go further in this playoff run. I keep refreshing Twitter to see what the return is on this trade. I don't want to miss it. You scoop me on this. You were the one that got to break the news on the trade. But no, I mean, I think in terms of that, and he always wanted to be in Boston. And now it comes to an end. So we'll see what ends up happening with Hall. Do you have any other leftover thoughts on Hall before we move on and go to other players that might be dealt or get?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something where it's just it depends on just what the end result is. I think if it's Bertuzzi or Hall, again, both are great players. Again, the perfect situation. The Bruins have both those guys. If they have a cap room, they don't. It's the nature of the business. That's what you got to deal with. And in this situation, you have to pick one of the two. If you're the Bruins, you're probably picking the younger guy. Gave you an added element at that net front spot. Was great on the power play. Was great with the focal point of your offense for now and the future. And David Pastrnak. Between those two guys, I think you're taking Bertuzzi probably 9 times out of 10. But I don't think that's an indictment on Hall and his effort and what he kind of provided here. But again, it's how these things work.
It is how these things work. Before we learn the return, why don't we touch on Torrey Krug? Because that's a fun situation for fans to kind of think about. Krug was kind of involved in the big blockbuster Kevin Hayes trade from St. Louis to Philly that has still not happened. No one really knows, what's the holdup is. Torrey Krug will not move his no trade. Is it no trade or no movement clause? I think it's
no movement clause.
No movement. Okay.
One of those. Yeah.
I always mix them up. But he will not move it to go to Chicago, to go to Philly, which he's earned the right to do that. He has. I mean, I think everyone's kind of in agreement there on that.
Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/Boston to join today. Maybe you're feeling good about the Red Sox and you want to place a futures bet on them, or maybe you want to go out on a limb and say the Bruins have a good chance of winning the Stanley Cup in 2023-24, and you want to place a futures bet on them. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission.
But in an interesting thing, if Krug, now that he knows St. Louis wants to move him, if somehow St. Louis retained a good amount of money, and maybe even Philly retained some of his money, I don't know, doing that, would you take him on the Bruins at a lower amount of money than he is now as a third pairing guy? Would you take it? Would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Torrey Krug was a great Bruin and loves playing here and still has, I think, some value at a cheaper deal. But I think if you're the Bruins, and
we have more breaking news, Connor. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Darren Drager tweeted Nick Foligno is included with Taylor Hall in the trade to Chicago. So there's another one.
There you go.
Pending UFA. So he is also in that deal. I'm very curious to see the return on this.
Yes.
I mean, I think we kind of assumed Nick Foligno probably wouldn't be back this season, given that, again, you're going to pay solid money. I mean, again, it's unfortunate for Foligno and Hall to go to a situation like that in Chicago. It's rebuilding, but I mean, you look at a guy like Taylor Hall, both older players in this league. They get to sort of be veteran presences for for the younger guys in Chicago. That might be something to look forward to. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's something where I think you look at, again, we'll see kind of what that situation is as a pending free agent. A guy like Foligno, I think, would be very coveted in a team like Chicago, rebuilding, needs a veteran presence. I think Foligno would fit in, spectacularly there for a team that kind of needs that presence in there. So good move by the Blackhawks in terms of just getting this pre-negotiating rights before July 1st. So wouldn't be surprised if they try to make leeway on that. Again, Chicago is not a great team at the moment, but still a great city. So you wonder if a guy like Foligno would, embrace that role there. So that's something worth mentioning. Again, it's not like it's huge cap savings or anything like that. It's just kind of giving a team like Chicago an extra kind of leg up, I guess, in terms of moving a guy like Foligno and giving him those couple extra days to hash out a contract. But it's still something where it's signaling there's going to be changes for the Bruins, right? If you look at, obviously, you move Hall, you expect the domino effect there of hopefully moving a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi. Again, we'll see what the return is for the Bruins, whether it's draft capital, if it's defensemen. We'll see kind of what exactly it is. But I think when you look at just what the Bruins are doing here, it's ideally retaining a guy like Bertuzzi, and then that fourth line, it's something that like with Foligno out of the picture, it opens the door. If you're the Bruins, you're incorporating young talent. Fourth line makes plenty of sense. Whether that's Beecher or Georgi Merkulov or Jakub Lauko, there's going to be opportunities there on that fourth line to inject faster skaters that are going to be hungry for minutes. So that, again, Hall for ideally Bertuzzi is the headliner there, but I still think there's other things in place that are worth mentioning there in terms of what this, the fallout from this trade could be.
Yeah, I wouldn't, as I said, I wouldn't expect a ton in return. I would mainly think the biggest thing is Bertuzzi, and Chris Johnson just tweeted, after clearing some much needed cap space, it would not be a surprise to see the Bruins take a run at re-signing pending UFA Tyler Bertuzzi before he hits the open market. That's not really a surprise. I think that's. I mean, if they feel secure enough to trade Hall, you have to think that Bertuzzi is close to done, or near it. Like that. Just to me, that makes a lot of sense. Again, I don't know why you would let one go. But it's funny, there's been a lot of there's been a lot of rumors recently. People saying the Bruins are doing some big things. Is this the big thing? Because it doesn't feel like the big thing. Maybe we all got our expectations so high for what it could be. We've talked a lot about Hall potentially being expendable. We've talked Olmark, we've talked Grzelcyk, we've talked about a lot of guys. This doesn't feel like it'll be it. I just have a weird feeling this won't be it. And that's not insider info. That's just like a feel on the whole thing. But I'm curious to see what other moves will be made, because I know that the feeling around the NHL and around a lot of people is there's going to be a lot of movement at this draft. Maybe not in terms of moving in and out of the first round as teams want to, but I think there's going to be a lot of transactions. And I'm curious to see what else the Bruins have left in store. And I'm also curious. Frank Saravalli, full trade per sources to the Bruins, rights to RFAs Ian Mitchell and Alec Regula. No salary retained by Boston. This represents a pure salary jump to clear $6 million off the Bruins books. So RFAs Ian Mitchell and Alec Regula. I don't know how much you know about them. I don't know a heck of a lot about these guys.
I want to say, I think Mitchell is a right shot. I want to say, yeah, Ian Mitchell's a right shot guy. So, I mean, that could be a potential guy. If you're looking at finding ways to sign cheaper guys, that could be, it's in the mix with Clifton most likely going. So, again, I'll probably have to do a little bit more digging in terms of these players and what they provide. But, again, you're acquiring probably two younger assets at two areas where there could be a lot of overhaul in terms of that defense. And again, it seems like it's a pure cap dump. So if moving Hall, who is a very good player, and Foligno, who remained to be seen if he was still going to be here, if you now then have the cap flexibility to re-sign a guy like Bertuzzi, and you inject a little bit of new blood in the system in defensemen like Mitchell and Regula, seems to make a lot of sense for the Bruins.
You take it. I really thought the number 1 pick was coming back in this trade, Connor, but it's just,
Yeah, I know.
Don, gets fleeced on this. No, as you said, this is about clearing cap space, and they did it. $6 million off the books, opens the door for Bertuzzi, and then, as I said, you wonder what is next. Is there anything else that they want to, is there more cap they want to clear? Do they want to move into the first round? I believe it was Emily Kaplan. I know Emily Kaplan had said something along the lines that teams were trying to move into the first round and really couldn't. And it feels like it's going to be a really hard first round to move into because the talent is so good. So I don't think there's much to do there. We were going to talk Ekman-Larsson. We were going to talk Krug, but it feels like this move for Taylor Hall took up most of this episode. If something big happens, we might jump on Bruins Ringside and do a YouTube video later. But this, I think this kind of covers it. Before we go though, Connor, let's do Ekman-Larsson for a second, just for a second. You wrote a story on Boston.com about this. He's bought out. He might want a cheap prove me type deal. Is that a fit? Is that a better fit than someone like Torrey Krug might be?
I think probably it's a better fit over a guy like Krug. Again, it all is going to depend on whether or not you can, you need a lot going your way. One, you have to make sure you have a spot for him. You have to make sure that he's still not on a steep decline, right? Because last year was not good. He was not very good at all on a very bad Vancouver team. And also it's going to depend on, yes, I think people naturally draw connections to Ekman-Larsson because he is a guy that only wanted to waive his no trade to either Boston or Vancouver back when Arizona was trying to move him. I think Friedman last week mentioned that he still likes Boston, but do you still like Boston enough to take a 1-year deal at $1.5 million, right? How much do you really like it? Or some team offers you 3 years, 10 million or something like that, or something where it's 3.5, 4.5 from another team. Do you like Boston enough to not take a deal like that? So I think it's going to depend on what he gets on the market. If he's a guy that's willing to do a 1-year prove-it deal and fit in on the second or third pair, makes a lot of sense for the Bruins, right? This is the guy that if he's playing, I don't think you have to expect him to be the same guy he was in Arizona. He's not going to be a guy that's going to have 15-plus goals, 25 minutes a night. But that first year in Vancouver, he was pretty underrated in terms of, I think he averaged about 21 minutes a night. Gave him, I think, 29 points in 77 games, was really good in his own zone. He had a lot of D-zone starts for that team. And again, if he's on the Bruins' second or third D pairing in a spot like that, I think you've got a situation where he could fit there if he's a stabilizing presence, just as a guy that can move the puck, fits in with the Bruins system. But at 6'2", not to say he's a bruiser, what have you, but he's a guy that's probably better equipped to hold up over kind of the punishing nature of the playoffs as opposed to maybe a guy like Grzelcyk. So I do think that's a situation where there is a fit there. It's just you need kind of the stars to align, right? You need him to, want to come here on a cheap deal. You need the Bruins to have space available. And again, then you run the gamble of, yes, we know the flaws of guys like Florber or Grzelcyk. You kind of know what you're getting with those guys. Ekman-Larsson, you may not. Maybe he is just what he is at this point, which for $1.5 million, it's not too bad, but if you're replacing one of those guys with a guy like Ekman-Larsson, who was a net negative last year, that's a problem. So there's a lot to kind of digest with that. But in terms of the Bruins cap situation now, you still aren't afforded a lot of chances to go out and sign the most expensive guy or the guy that's a proven commodity. You kind of have to go searching for value. And a guy like Ekman-Larsson, if he can be half of what he was in Arizona, if he can be somewhat what he was at first in Vancouver, brings value there.
There's value. I'll be curious to see what ends up happening. But the big news, obviously, Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno dealt to Chicago for Ian Mitchell and Alec Regula, both RFAs. So that's today's episode. We finally got news to break on the show. This is
you need a screen cap of me. You need a screen cap of me when I got the the first text that came up, and I was like Matthew McConaughey, that meme of him when he's like, so good job, Evan. Good job improvising.
We did it. I had a feeling coming into this as we were sitting down, and because I knew when Elliot Friedman tweeted out the thing that linked Chicago to Boston, I was like, usually when one of those guys tweets something like that, the news is like right after. So it's like, I think we hit it right this time. But anyways, Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe?
Yeah, we're going to have you covered, obviously, with this news from today, the fallout from this. We got the NHL awards, got the draft, we got free agency on Saturday. At long last, Evan, we finally have stuff to talk about. We almost have too much stuff to talk about now.
We had too much. There was stuff that we would have talked about more, but we had enough today.
But again, all that stuff throughout this offseason that starts to ramp up, we'll have you covered over at Boston.com. So please read over there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that, and remember to go subscribe to New England Hockey Journal. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We're presented by FanDuel. Have a great rest of your day.